sizimisele ukuwabulala wona lamabhunu. Thina bantu bomkhonto sizimisele ukuwabulala wona lamabhunu. Hamba kahle mkhonto wesizwe. Thina bantu bomkhonto sizimisele ukuwabulala wona lamabhunu. Thina bantu bomkhonto sizimisele ukuwabulala wona lamabhunu. Mandla!
The ANC Circular 213/6 of June 1993. Comments allegedly made by the current President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, to Dr. Maria Orihani Ambrosini during 1994. Now, 25 years ago. Dr. Maria Orihani Ambrosini was a close friend and advisor to Dr. Mangosuthu Buthelezi, a Zulu prince and member of the Inkatha Freedom Party. He later became a member of parliament for the Inkatha Freedom Party and passed away after a long bout with cancer on August 16, 2014. He was known to be trustworthy and to the point. In his memoirs, The Prince and I, A South African Institutional Odyssey, he says the following about Cyril Ramaphosa. Mr. Ramaphosa stood head and shoulders above his colleagues in the African National Congress as well as above the National Party's negotiators. He was a born leader and a straight shooter. Nor did he ever lie or misrepresent anything. In his brutal honesty, Ramaphosa told me of the ANC's 25-year strategy to deal with the whites. It would be like boiling a frog alive, which is done by raising the temperature very slowly. Being cold-blooded, the frog does not notice the slow temperature increase, but if the temperature is raised suddenly, the frog will jump out of the water. He meant that the black majority would pass laws transferring wealth, land, and economic power from white to black slowly and incrementally, until the whites lost all they had gained in South Africa, but without taking too much from them at any given time to cause them to rebel, or fight. Mr. Ramaphosa told the South African Communist Party that far higher levels of investment are needed to ensure economic growth. Also that the mass expropriation of white-owned property would scare off already weary investors. But despite this warning, Ramaphosa has gone ahead and endorsed the ANC's policy of a national democratic revolution. This makes the intentions of the ANC and SACP towards whites in South Africa questionable at best.
And so, Francis, by a gradual process of incremental taxation, I declare that the general populace will be unaware of the stranglehold our government will eventually have over them.
Huh? Is it me, or is it getting hot in here, Morris?
When the ANC was confronted about the content of this document, they did not deny its authenticity. It was explained that the document was distributed to boost the morale of the ANC's followers. For those who doubt the authenticity of this document, I will explain why there can be no doubt that it is authentic. In fact, it fits in perfectly with the timeline of events that led to the talks between Mandela and de Klerk, at the end of 1992, to the start of 1993, up to where they started their election campaigns. On September 26, 1992, the South African government and the ANC came to a record of understanding, where a timetable was set up for establishing a constitutional assembly, an interim government, and the release of political prisoners. On the 20th, 22nd, 25th and 26th of January 1993, the two parties led by Mr. Rolf Meyer and Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, held bilateral meetings where a model for a government of national unity, and the date of elections were discussed. Between the 19th and 21st of February 1993, the ANC Foreign Affairs Department hosts an international solidarity conference in Johannesburg, to mobilize international support and help raise funds for its election campaign. On May 1, 1993, Nelson Mandela caused a political dispute when he wanted 14-year-old children to be allowed to vote in the April 1994 elections. Nelson Mandela resumed his presidential campaign by visiting the USA on July 1, 1993. All these facts are documented in South African newspapers and even in papers abroad, like the New York Times. On April 1, 1993, what became known as the multi-party negotiating process, attempts were made to get all parties at the negotiating table to discuss elections. The negotiations failed to attract parties from the far left and right. Despite that, already at the start of June 1993, the election date was set for April 27, 1994. That was one of the main reasons why some Afrikaner groups stormed the World Trade Center in Kempton Park, on June 25, 1993. One can imagine that someone, somewhere, in a celebratory mood, would type a celebratory letter. If you add bad intent to such a letter, you may well come up with this type of circular.
On the 8th of April, 1960, the administration of Charles Robert Swart banned the ANC and forced the party to leave South Africa. Okay? This is all mostly from Wikipedia, MK's website, and the ANC's little About Us thing. Okay? So, none of this is controversial information. Now, after the ban, that's after 1960, the ANC formed the Umkhozo Mswezi, the Spear of the Nation, to fight against apartheid using guerrilla warfare and sabotage, i.e. it was a terrorist organization. Now, Umkhozo Mswezi, abbreviated as MK, is Xhosa pronunciation. Again, I'm giving you the best pronunciation I can. I'm not even going to try to read that gobbledygook. Meaning the Spear of the Nation was the paramilitary wing, and this is important. Communist operations always have a political wing and a paramilitary wing. Political wing and ANC, Umkhozo Mswezi. They're communists, thank you. Was the paramilitary wing of the African National Congress. Its mission was to fight against and topple the South African government and the ruling National Party and the apartheid policies, obviously. After warning, imagine the cheekery, the South African government in June 1961 of its intent to resist, to conduct guerrilla warfare, MK launched its first attacks against government installations on 16th of December 1961. So that's how far back all this goes. Okay? I don't have perfect information on this, but I have enough to deduce with ease that they are communists, that they're terrorists, that they're capable of murder, and that they will steal. Following the suppression of MK, that's by the African police, South African police, and South African Defense Forces, in the late 1960s, about 66, they had it under control. MK fell back to these border areas we discussed: Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia, and into Angola too as well. Now, the organization's cadres undertook military actions against the Rhodesian army allied with Bob and the boys. You know, Comrade Bob, that's Robert Mugabe. Now, and Joseph Sabingu, is that his name? Anyway, he was the other half of the two parties that were allied together against the white Rhodesian government. Now, in 1965, MK formally allied itself with the Zimbabwean People's Revolutionary Army. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a communist operation at all. Now, let's get all down to the bottom of this, where people, oh, they didn't commit violence, they were saints. And their own Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which was designed to whitewash their past and play up the evil whites, found that torture by MK was, quote, routine, as were executions, quote, without due process at ANC detention camps. In other words, if they caught you, they killed you. And they tortured you before they killed you. This was particularly true in the period of 1979 to 89, which is the period when the brush war was most intense. These are the periods where they have 3-4 officers that go out with 12 blacks, but the blacks got tortured and killed too. Remember this. There was no discrimination in the torture killing at their camps. So, but their only defense is torture wasn't official policy, though it was routine, regular, and could be expected. Now, the basic fact is the ANC is an outright Stalinist-style party that hates whites, right? It hates whites and wants to undermine them. It wants to do exactly what that Joseph Malema guy says openly he wants to do, but they want to do it bureaucratically, silently, and sterilized like. Okay? There's no difference between the two. And MK still exists as an organization and says that every property that they want, they're taking. I mean, I listen to the guy say it just that much. Right? While they're singing, kill the whitey, kill the farmer, kill the whitey, kill the farmer, you know? Right? And I mean, it sounds lovely. They sing well, but they're singing, kill the boer, kill the farmer, take his land, drive him into the sea, and so forth. It's a whole elaborate song that's, it's not to my taste, you know? And these wussies, these Western conservatives, oh, well, you don't know what you know, you could know everything I know and more. You have better education than me. You've had more leisure than me. You have more excess money than me. You know, you have every entitlement in life that I had to struggle like a bastard to get. And you just don't know any of this because you don't care to know. You can't even go look to MK's website, ANC's own website, and Wikipedia. Now, that's not much to know. It's easy. And when you get to looking at the thing like the brush war, you know, with South Africa, you notice that, yes, it's obvious they're fighting against kind of a, almost like a united communist front across all of southern Africa. Okay? And it's obvious when the United States made them not only give up in Angola and basically cast UNITA down, but also just flip-flop in Namibia. We triggered this whole, because at the same time, it's what's unknown, is America and Britain put pressure, said basically, we will utterly embargo you. We also made the nightmare that is Rhodesia happen. Britain was the main bulldog on that, but, you know, yeah. It's ridiculous. And because of all this, the horror that was Mozambique when they, you know, I mean, it was so bad. Rhodesia fell into Mozambique. Mozambicans tried, you know, okay? South Africa is the last bastion of white people in Africa. If you look at what happened in Rhodesia, Mozambique, Angola, Namibia still has a pretty sizable population, but they live in condensed enclaves and have a really very much siege mentality. They won't admit it because the Stalin and SWAPO go crazy on them, but SWAPO doesn't know how many weapons they have buried. That's the only reason SWAPO has been, you know, moved back. But see, the ANC has been told for a long time they have to keep it nice. But they were told by the World Bank not 3 months ago now, you can move on these people's property. Property confiscation doesn't fret us. What? Now why would the World Bank need to have an opinion? because they're one of the main backers and movers of these people. And you people are, no, you still have to make a major decision. It comes down to massive defensive perimeter or leave. Those are the only two options. Those are the only two viable long-term options that can keep even half of you alive. Otherwise, people like, again, this Joseph Malema dude, who was a member of parliament and leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters and the rest, he'll eventually get the swing needed to just start coming at you, because the MK are becoming tired with this nice. They want violent. They want to kill the farmer, kill the boer. They want to come at you, just like the song says. Yeah, not much else to be said there, is there?
Be careful not to upset the farmers too much, before we gain control of the SAP and SADF. While our comrades in MK and APLA continue with their part of the struggle. Since 1994, the ANC have replaced high-ranking white officers in the police and defense force with black officers. In the higher positions, those posts were filled by members of the ANC military wing, Umkhonto we Sizwe, and the Pan-Africanist Congress's military wing, the Azanian People's Liberation Army. More than half of the military wings of the ANC and PAC were integrated into the police and defense forces. Promotions for whites were put on hold while their black counterparts were promoted into posts they were not qualified for. Recently there has been an effort to promote even more ex-MK and APLA members into high police ranks. This effort is currently being contested in court by the civil rights group, Solidarity. Should the ANC succeed, it would mean that people without any formal police training or experience and many without any form of education will be placed in command of police members who have strived for many years to reach these ranks. What has been happening in the South African police is no different to what has been happening in the South African Defence Force. This, the out-of-control corruption, and the sudden intensified efforts of the ANC to expropriate white property without compensation 25 years on, makes one think that there is truth in the comments of Mr. Ramaphosa about the plan with whites. Farm attacks and murders became more prevalent when the ANC's armed struggle began in 1961. These attacks intensified in 1991. For the year 1991 there were a total of 66 murders and this number increased every year. For 1994 there were a total of 92 farm murders. After 1994, this number rose drastically. The average farm murders recorded per year went up to 140, between 1997 and 2002. On February 14, 2003, President Mbeki announced that the commando system that was put in place by the previous government to protect farmers had to be disbanded. This prompted farmers to rely more on private security companies and self-protection to guard against attacks, which eventually led to a drop in the murder of farmers. Between 2003 and 2018, the average murder rate per year was 70. In 2003, a committee of inquiry into farm attacks were set up. The decision of the committee was that the main motive of farm attacks were robbery. This inquiry did however not consider the testimonies of the thousands of farmers who had by that time already been attacked, or took in account the manner in which these attacks took place, or the heinous acts perpetrated on farmers and their families during these attacks. Here is an excerpt of the report. Organized agriculture garnered a great deal of support from white commercial farmers and prevailed upon government to take responsibility for the safety and security of farmers. Consequently, in October 1998, former President Mandela hosted a rural safety summit to address the concerns of organized agriculture. Organized agriculture was of the opinion that the criminal justice system was ineffective and that perpetrators of farm attacks were literally getting away with murder. In addition, organized agriculture was also of the opinion that the attacks on white commercial farmers were politically and racially motivated, the idea being to drive white people off the farms in order to make land available for redistribution. By typifying the attacks in such a way, the agricultural unions contributed to the popular perception that farm attacks were a continuation of the armed struggle against the apartheid state waged by Umkhonto we Sizwe and the Azanian People's Liberation Army. During the Truth and Reconciliation hearings held in 1996, a number of PAC and ANC members applied for amnesty on the grounds that the policy of their organization had been to terrorize white farmers and drive them off their land. This fact, and the total lack of government to take responsibility for the safety of farmers, affirms the claim of organized agriculture. Although the murder rate dropped since 2003, the attacks on farmers have been on a steady increase. The reason less farm attacks lead to serious crime is because farmers have become more weary of their safety. Many of these attacks are averted and consequently not reported and captured on the statistics. The incidents usually captured are those that lead to robbery, rape, assault, or murder. The use of signal jamming equipment is illegal in South Africa, and is normally only used by the South African Defence Force. However, these devices have been used during several instances including some farm attacks, as depicted in this photo taken from a farm's video footage. Many from the farming and white communities believe that the ANC and MK have not distanced themselves from their original plans to destroy whites in South Africa. There is ample evidence to support this claim. I will admit that South Africa has a huge crime problem, and that this has a role to play in many farm attacks. But to generalize the motive of every attack and attribute it to robberies gone wrong is just blatantly dishonest. Consider the following points. 1. To attack a farm and get past all the security measures put in place by farmers, an attacker will need to be well prepared, well armed, and have inside information. 2. In many cases it happens that nothing is stolen during an attack. Why would a robber go through all the difficulty of planning an attack, travel very long distances to remote farms, risk dying or being caught and then steal nothing? 3. Why would a robber feel the need to torture his victims for hours at end, rape babies, mutilate their victims' bodies in the most horrific ways, and only then kill them? Do they think raping a baby cures AIDS? Do they actually believe, the louder their victims scream in pain, the greater warrior their ancestors will think they are? Yes, however absurd it may sound, many black African males actually do believe it. 4. The torture methods used are much the same as MK used in the ANC military camps like Quatro. Farmers and their families are hamstrung to stop them from fleeing, then they will be tortured for hours by burning them with substances, beating and stabbing them with objects, rape them and then eventually kill them. Pictures of their mutilated bodies can easily be found by searching farm murders. In this video clip, 6 would-be attackers found a way past all the security measures at a farmhouse. Luckily there was no one at home. From their demeanor it was obvious that their plans were to murder, or torture their victims. They took their time to first poison 4 dogs outside, and then went straight to the bedrooms. When they found no one at home, they left without stealing anything. There are allegations against politicians, who may be involved in organizing hit squads to murder farmers. Allegations have been followed up which led to Lethuli House, the headquarters of the ANC. The following recording was made of a gang member, part of the notorious 28's prison gang, to a security officer. The recording implicates Julius Malema from the radical communist EFF political party. The EFF is a fringe party of the ANC, which at its core strive for the same political outcome.
Inciting violence is one thing, but hiring assassins is another. We received a copy of a very interesting conversation between a national intelligence agent and a so-called general of the notorious prison gang, the 28s. He spent more than 20 years in jail for farm murders and was released in December.
Hulle my ook gesê binnekant wanneer ek uitkom dan moet ek kontak maak met Julius Malema, die ou van Limpopo, van die EFF. Want hy was ook nou hier nou in September. Toe was Julius Malema, toe was ek by Pretoria, New York. Toe kom hy daar by New York, toe vra hy daar te sê daar wanneer julle betes wil goue span hê, wanneer julle wil 'n span hê, kom check my by Limpopo. Ek gaan julle span gee, wat ek julle gaan gee daar is 'n balaclava, 'n gun en cash. Want hy sê daar hy steun die boere. Die Julius Malema. Hy sê jy moet net vir my 'n paar moorde pleeg op boere plase.
We invited Mr. Malema to respond to us either on camera or in writing, but simply received a one-line reply from the EFF stating that the CIC is not available to take the interview due to his busy schedule.
South Africa has one of the highest murder rates in the world, at 35 per 100,000 people. The rate of murders on farmers is a shocking 150 per 100,000. Being a South African farmer is more dangerous than any other occupation on the planet. These are verifiable facts which the ANC are trying to cover up with all means possible. It is hard to believe how arrogant and openly malicious these people are. Yet they get away with killing white South Africans in a well-orchestrated slow genocide. Since 1994, about 485,000 people in the general population have been murdered in South Africa, but because race has been omitted from statistics, it is almost impossible to say how many of these victims were white. I can say for sure that violent crimes against whites have increased considerably, and is disproportionately higher than other groups. Also, crimes committed by whites are so low, that it barely makes a dent in the high crime statistics. This is however not what is perpetuated in the country's news media.
We were seated together at the lunch table, so we never really got time to talk about the tweet. It was just an opportunity to shake hands, to say how are you and all that. But on the tweet itself, he was clearly misinformed. And whoever gave him that information was completely wrong. And whoever gave him that information was completely wrong. There are no killings of farmers or white farmers in South Africa. There are no killings of farmers or white farmers in South Africa.
Is this man freaking serious? The following short video clip contains footage that may upset sensitive viewers. One of the more recent farm attacks happened on April 8, 2019. As the farmer came out of his house, he was met by a hail of bullets. The farmer was struck 4 times during the assault. He was later airlifted to hospital, where as of now, April 14, 2019, he is still in a critical condition. Him facing the attackers probably saved his wife, who was inside the house, from possible torture, rape and murder. The ANC's Commission of Inquiry would want you to believe that this was just another robbery gone wrong. The attacker even came back to finish what he started, but the firearm misfired. Conservative estimates place the number of farmers killed on their farms since 1991 at over 4,000. The nephew of this farmer was one of those victims when he was brutally murdered on the same farm 3 years ago. This is just one of more than 14 similar incidents that happen on small holdings and farms every week. And still our president tells the world,
there are no killings of farmers or white farmers in South Africa.
surplus land will be redistributed among our people. Please take note. All through this document, it is made clear what is meant by our people. It certainly does not include white people, and never mentions other minority groups. So when you hear ANC politicians speak about our people, understand what is meant by it. I will not go into the whole issue of land ownership, because it will become a very lengthy debate. I will only put it out there that the narrative the ANC, EFF, and BLF are spreading, that whites stole land, is completely false. If you do proper research of the history of South Africa, by using older reliable sources, and somehow manage to avoid the heaps of propaganda on the internet, the truth will become patently clear. And that is, that the SACP and its propaganda machine, is using land ownership as a weapon against whites. In fact, if you search the internet, and test the propaganda by comparing it to the actual history of South Africa, you will find to what lengths these propagandists have gone in an attempt to rewrite the history of South Africa, in order to justify the cause for land expropriation without compensation. Because of these unsubstantiated allegations, the Transvaal Agricultural Union, which has been in existence since 1897, in May 2017 offered a reward of 100,000 rand to anybody who could prove beyond reasonable doubt that any commercial farmer or member of the Transvaal Agricultural Union gained ownership in a way that constitutes theft. Up to date, no one has come forward to claim this easy prize. Here is one of the reasons why I believe the ANC, EFF, BLF and SACP are working together as one team, despite the constant infighting between party members. Mr. Ramaphosa had barely taken office when he accepted the motion of the EFF to expropriate white property. Somehow the motions of minority parties, however absurd, are accepted by the majority party, as long as they follow the same socialist policies. Despite history counting against the allegation that whites stole land, despite the countless warnings that the country's economy will collapse as was the case with the recent collapse of Zimbabwe and Venezuela, despite the warning from several groups of the population that this will lead to a certain civil war and starvation, the motion to expropriate white property was passed in Parliament. Land expropriation without compensation is nothing more than racist land theft, conspired by parties who follow the same socialist policies, under the banner of the South African Communist Party.
The legal process to expropriate has now been put in motion. 241 members voted for the motion, while 83 voted against it. It will now be referred to Parliament's Constitutional Review Committee to process the amendments and also review Section 25 of the Constitution, which deals with the expropriation of land. The EFF and the ANC were joined by several minority parties in passing the motion and effectively started the emotive process of expropriating land without compensation.
We must ensure that we restore the dignity of our people without compensating the criminals who stole our land. Those who continue to protect these crimes are themselves accused of crime, because those who protect crime are criminals themselves.
This will be implemented in a way that increases agricultural production, improves food security, and ensure that land is returned to those from whom it was taken.
The ANC, the National Freedom Party, the EFF, and the IFP are all in agreement we must expropriate. So what is the delay? There's no need for a debate. Let's go forward. Let's go out there and expropriate.
Today, the descendants of those brutal land dispossessors sit here in suits and ties and want to pontificate to us. What nerve, what arrogance.
I urge the ruling party to develop a backbone of steel and stop speaking with forked tongues. The issue of land has been with the ruling party since the dawn of democracy. However, they have done nothing so far.
But the DA, COPE, FF Plus and the ACDP tried hard to push back. They argued strongly against the amendment of the Constitution and that the motion might result in unintended consequences.
The fact is this: expropriation without compensation is a blatant lie. It is a lie being peddled by a desperate ANC that fears being outflanked by the EFF.
The narrative that the land was stolen must stop because it's false.
I do not know if this is out of arrogance or ignorance, but if you want to break a country's economy and kill a lot of people really fast, destroy the main food supply. Mr. Terror Lakota, a highly respected political leader of the party, Congress of the People, was part of the ANC's struggle during apartheid. He was jailed with Nelson Mandela on Robben Island, for conspiring to commit acts, endangering the maintenance of law and order. He left the ANC during 2008 with the following words: "There is no way I can return to the company of men and women, who are dead set on destroying the constitutional democracy, which I give most of my life to creating. I will go to the grave a member of the Congress of the People." Since then, the ANC, EFF, BLF and SACP, who all support the same communist ideologies, have tried to ridicule Mr. Lakota wherever they can. This becomes even more apparent when he speaks on topics of land reform and the meaning of our people. No one within the SACP knows more about the movement than Mr. Lakota. That is why they will try to disrupt him wherever they can.
Last Thursday, we joined you at when you took the oath of office. You announced following the Chief Justice that you would obey, observe, uphold, and maintain the Constitution. The following day, on Friday, in the evening, you now announced in your speech that you would expropriate land without compensation. The question that confronts us is that this Constitution, if it is this Constitution that you are swearing allegiance to, it says, Section 25, it says that no one may be deprived of their property. It also says that where expropriation happens, it must be with compensation. The question, therefore, that must arise is whether you took your oath to this Constitution or to another Constitution. Because
on a point of order,
we must raise the question.
Honorable Lakota,
if you are...
Honorable Lakota, do take your seat, sir. Yes, what's the point of order?
I wanted to ask if Honorable Lakota has been paid by fascists of the Nationalist Party to come and squash the land
Honorable
program
member.
of our people.
That's not.
This will be very dangerous. What alternative do you have for us to have back the land?
Deputy Speaker.
What did you go to Robben Island to do?
Something is wrong with this
What were you doing in Robben Island?
Honorable Ndlozi. Honorable Ndlozi.
What were you
This
doing
time
in
is
Robben
run.
Island?
I'm now left with 45.
Honorable Ndlozi. No.
This is sabotage. This is 1:45. I haven't spoken for a minute. And this thing is 1 minute 45 left. There is a sabotage. I've been watching this thing. It's only, I haven't spoken for a minute. And this thing is 1 minute 45 left. No, something must be corrected. You must correct this.
During the parliamentary speech, Lakota was interrupted continuously with irrelevant questions, belittled by other party members, and laughed at by the rest of the leftist parliament members. The questions he raised are the ones the ANC would want to avoid answering. This is, however, no laughing matter, because what the ANC and their cronies are doing will lead to a certain civil war. It is absolutely painful to listen to these grown people behaving so immature in Parliament, so I cut out most of the parts where Mr. Lakota was disrupted.
Are you going to take the properties of the great-grandchildren of the Indian indentured laborers who came here? Whose properties are you going to take? Are you going to take the properties of the French Huguenots and German refugees who came here running away from religious wars in Europe?
Point of order.
Whose properties are you going to take?
What's your point of order?
Is it going to be the properties of the great-grandchildren of the slaves that came from Malay Peninsula and from the Philippines Island? Whose properties are you going to take?
Please take your seat.
Please, you must let us know. Are you going to take the properties of the great-grandchildren of the Indians who came here to grow sugarcane in Natal? And if so, why? Are you going to take the properties of the people who arrived here, enslaved from the Malay Peninsula, whose leader, Abdurrahman Mortula, is lying on Robben Island? Whose properties are going to be taken? Are you going to amend the Bill of Rights? Are you going to amend the Bill of Rights, Comrade President, so that South Africa must know that this constitution is no longer relevant under your leadership? Are you going to take the Bill of Rights? Are you going to take our rights under the Bill of Rights? We really need to know that reply.
Deputy Speaker.
And we cannot not ask that question today.
Deputy Speaker.
We ask it and we want to know. If you are going to give this land, you said something, you are going to give the land to our people. Now please tell us, who is not our people in this country? Who is our people? Who is not our people? Who is, I'm not one of you. Well,
what are you raising on,
it's a matter that the president will answer. Who is not our people? Who is our people? This constitution says all of us are South Africans. And all of us have got the same rights. So leave the howlers aside.
Deputy Speaker.
Who are you going to give the land to? You take it from whom, and to whom are you going to give it? We want to answer.
Take your seat. What are you raising, honorable member?
I want to check if Mr. Terra Lakota can take a question.
Honorable Lakota.
I'm asking questions. You can answer them. President, if you are going to take the land, are you going to give it to Basotho, or are you going to give to which section of the population?
Point of order,
Who is our people? I must ask this question. Who is our people? Who is not our people? The National Party used to say, others are Europeans, others are non-Europeans. No, who is our people, who is non our people? I want to know that. No, my time is not finished.
all positions in the public services will be replaced by comrades. The security forces will be reconstructed with their comrades, to protect our people. Whites were protected for 350 years. Let them experience to be second-class citizens. I have already discussed in part, how the ANC have integrated members from the MK and APLA into the police and defense forces. This was only one step to the complete takeover of the police and defense force. Here, as well as in the private sector, affirmative action played a major role in making it extremely difficult for whites to find work, and almost impossible to be promoted. Affirmative action has led to a large number of highly skilled white people being retrenched, and replaced by black people, with very little knowledge of the work they have to do. A good example is the main power supplier, Eskom, which used to be hailed as the pride of South African engineering genius. Today, this utility has become so dilapidated, that it is believed to be beyond repair. The situation is so bad, that even the opportunistic Chinese are careful to invest in it. Despite Eskom's rapid decline, the ANC government has refused to re-employ highly skilled white engineers, solely based on the color of their skin. These engineers have since moved on to share their expertise in other countries. Black economic empowerment and broad-based black economic empowerment is another monster on its own. It is a form of affirmative action. What it is supposed to do is bring the black majority into the economic mainstream, but the way it is applied, coupled with several other factors, has a devastating effect on the country's economy. Businesses are given a rating point according to the number of black employees. The business with the highest rating points get preference when it comes to tenders. This forces white-owned companies to give away shares to a black partner in order to continue doing business. If that black partner decides to leave, it causes major problems for the company. White business owners lose in every respect, having to give away shares to a black partner, who may leave the business at any moment without consequences, lose those shares, and are forced to employ a majority of black employees. If their company does not comply with Black Economic Empowerment Acts, the owners face jail time of up to 10 years and a hefty fine of up to 10% of the company's annual turnover. A person convicted of such an offense would also suffer the restraint of not being able to transact with the state or with any organ of the state or public entity for a period of 10 years. Explaining the problems with black economic empowerment will be a lengthy video on its own. I would suggest you do some research, and point out that it is wrought with a lot of corruption, prejudice, racism and discrimination. Here are some statements made by prominent figures in South Africa, about this draconic system. With one or two exceptions, black economic empowerment is benefiting still fewer people. It has also hindered our performance as an investment destination, because companies see it as an extra tax. Leading economist, Mike Schuessler. The present black economic empowerment policy is, with respect, not a cure-all to real broad-based black economic empowerment. Millions of black people feel left out, and are very skeptical since they cannot enter the formal economy. They only see a few that largely benefited from tenderpreneurship and not from hard work. ANC Treasurer General, Matthews Pausa. Black economic empowerment and affirmative action are discriminatory policies, which have been used as red herrings to enrich the politically connected elite, while misleading the majority into believing their time will come soon. These policies are the catalyst of corruption, and completely unconstitutional, while nurturing a parasitic culture, without contributing to sustainable economic growth. Politician, Tara Lakota. Since the implementation of affirmative action in 1998, the country's economy has been on decline. Infrastructure in every state-owned entity such as Eskom, South African Airways, South African Broadcasting Corporation and several others, have fallen apart, due to corruption and incompetence, as a result of black economic empowerment, and government interference. When a country needs to apply these kinds of laws against a minority group, alarm bells should go off. The ANC are not only incompetent to run a government, but they are also hell-bent on destroying the white population. The question is, with the violent track record of the rest of Africa, will it end with whites? To see what impact affirmative action has had on the white population, do some research on the more than 1,000 and growing number of white squatter camps, which are filled with qualified people, laid off from jobs due to the ANC's racist policies.
Racism is the exclusion of one group by another for the purpose of oppressing the excluded group.
Is that not precisely what is happening to white South Africans? Thank you for clearing it up, Mr. Ndile Mkitama.
Deputy Speaker, the subject of this motion is not about creating job opportunities. It is about ensuring that there is fair and equal access to job opportunities. And the honourable member from the ANC, the Honourable Van Schalkwyk, came here and she complained about the fact that there is not service delivery, there is not equality when it comes to service delivery, and it is actually blaming because of white workers in the situation and that blacks don't have that opportunities. What's the real fact? Let me say to this honourable member, at this moment, more than 40,000 vacant positions are available at local government level for water engineers. Why are they vacant? Because they are reserved as affirmative action vacancies. There are white engineers, there are brown engineers, but you laugh, you don't want to appoint them. And that's why we get the situation where sewage just flow into our rivers. Therefore, Deputy Speaker, if we want to ensure equal and fair access, then we must do away with affirmative action. Dit is totaal onaanvaarbaar. Dat jong mense wat in 94 gebore is, vandag die prys moet betaal, omdat hulle wit is, mag hulle nie werk kry nie. Omdat hulle wit is, mag hulle sekere posisies nie kry nie, mag hulle nie beurse kry nie. And you can look at the youth employment scheme, even from the president. Wanneer wit mense aansoek doen, ons jeug daarvoor aansoek doen, dan sê die rekenaar, julle mag nie want julle is wit. Toe ons klagtes gelê het by die Menseregte Kommissie, toe word daar verandering gemaak. Maar u mislei die mense van Suid-Afrika. Want jy kan aansoek doen, maar nog steeds nie deel van die skema nie. Jou CV word na ander plekke gestuur. Dit is rasisme. Dis discriminasie. If you want to ensure fair and just access, do away with affirmative action.
No ammunition will be available to white settlers. Of the registered private firearms in South Africa, most are owned by minority groups. The reasons for ownership range from collector, hunting, sport shooting, and self-protection. It is also worthy to note that white South Africans have had a gun culture for centuries. so much so that before 1994, sports shooting formed part of high school activities. During the early 1990s, after Mandela's release from prison, crime escalated completely out of control. Because of growing crime and poor performance of the criminal justice system, many South Africans sought guns out of a desire for safety. Firearm applications more than doubled in 1994 to 242,000. The organization, Gun-Free South Africa, or GFSA, was an idea formed in 1993, and it was established in 1995, with the intention to reduce gun-related violence in South Africa. At first the purpose was to remove illegal firearms out of the hands of political factions, in order to prevent a coup, and later the reason was given to keep firearms out of criminal hands. But over time the organization has made changes to its policies, by focusing more on private-owned firearms. GFSA is supported and largely funded by the Open Society Foundation, a worldwide organization that supports open borders and a gun-free society, and which was established in 1993 by billionaire George Soros. It seems many things were happening in 1993 when it comes to South Africa. The organization lobbied for stricter private gun control, and in 1999 got several organizations to endorse their proposed firearms control bill. The organization took their proposed bill to Parliament. In 2000, despite massive opposition from South Africa's gun lobby, the Firearms Control Act was passed and promulgated in 2004. The previous law where you had a license for life was changed, so that it had to be renewed every 5 years for normal licenses, and 10 years for dedicated sports shooting. This put a lot of pressure on police stations who could not cope with the amount of renewals. In the end many licenses expired due to this pressure, a lack of communication with the public, and people who just gave up on renewing licenses under this failed system. Although the intentions of Gun-Free South Africa on the surface seems very noble, one cannot ignore the fact that their main objective is to completely disarm every person in South Africa. One can also not ignore the seemingly unhindered influence this private organization has had, and still has, on firearm legislation. Therefore it is worthy to look into. GFSA claims to represent the unarmed majority against the plots of the South African gun lobby. This is an absurd assertion, as if to say licensed gun owners are conspiring to oppress unarmed citizens. They also claim that gun owners are the greatest source of guns obtained by criminals. This is yet another unsupported claim, that when one starts looking at the number of legally owned firearms that have been stolen, compared to the estimated illegal firearms currently in the country, the numbers do not add up by a very large margin. GFSA and anti-gun lobbyists claim that there are currently more than 2.35 million firearms in criminal hands, and that these firearms were stolen from legal owners. This is yet another false claim. Police statistics show that firearms are recovered in most of these theft cases. However, there is also proof of massive corruption within the police, where thousands of confiscated illegal firearms that had their serial numbers removed have found their way back into criminal circulation. During an independent study made by the University of South Australia, it was found that there are an estimated 13 million firearms in South Africa, of which about 3 million are legally registered. This was a very conservative estimate, since it isn't possible to say how many illegal firearms have flowed over the unprotected borders, and by other means of illegal trade, into South Africa. While GFSA has been chipping away on gun laws, the ANC government has played its part in making it almost impossible to legally obtain a firearm. While ignoring the plea of the South African gun lobby, the government has systematically applied the rules set out by GFSA. This gives the impression that they are working together, to disarm ordinary citizens. The government argued that because firearms are dangerous weapons, the firearms database of the police needed to be updated in order to have proper regulation, and therefore changes in the law was needed. However, the changes in the law only created more problems, since the database of the police is in an even worse state of chaos. South Africa's gun laws have been criticized for being way too strict, by restricting owners to defend themselves against attacks from criminals. Even the Constitutional Court has ruled that owning a gun is not a right, but a privilege. In October 2018, a draft bill was drawn up that proposes to take away self-defense as a reason for owning a gun. If this bill is passed, it will violate a citizen's right to life. This bill was accidentally leaked to Diane Kohler-Barnard, DA member of the Parliamentary Police Portfolio Committee, and it caused a public outrage. Since then the proposed bill was downplayed by Parliament and police. Kohler-Barnard remarked, considering the mass public outrage, hopefully it will be swept under the same carpet the current government hides all its crackpot legislation and failed ideas. On the other side, the director of Gun Free SA, Adele Kirsten, said most licensed firearm owners in South Africa owned a handgun for self-defense. She remarked that their organization would recommend these new amendments to the Firearms Act. It makes one wonder how much input GFSA had into the discussions regarding this draconic bill. A recent problem that arose came with the renewal of firearm licenses. If an applicant is late with his renewal application and could give a good reason, the license could still be renewed. On February 6, 2016, the acting police commissioner, Kamatsa Paslani, issued an illegal directive in prohibiting designated firearms officers, and the Central Firearms Registry from accepting and processing expired firearm license renewal applications. Furthermore, the Central Firearms Registry sabotaged their IT system, to make it incapable of processing renewals. All of this is in stark contravention of provisions of the Firearms Control Act. Despite this, the Constitutional Court made a decision on June 7, 2018 that these firearms are now illegally in possession of the owners. This means that hundreds of thousands of legal owners have been criminalized. After this, the organization, Gun Owners of South Africa, challenged this decision in the North Gauteng High Court, which ended in the court granting an interdict in favor of legal owners. I have spoken to designated firearms officers at different police stations recently. The Central Firearms Registry is a mess and is constantly offline. Furthermore, officers at some police stations are confused about the processing of applications where the reason is self-protection, while others knew nothing about this instruction. It seems the police are expecting this law to be passed, while at the same time high-ranking officials are denying it is being considered. Either, the left hand does not know what the right hand is doing, or gun owners are being misled. In May 2019, the current police minister, Becky Cele, gazetted a draft amendment which will prohibit security companies from carrying high-caliber firearms. This amendment to the act is currently being opposed by security companies since it will put citizens and security members at risk. Criminals will have much higher firepower than security, making this amendment not only ridiculous, but also dangerous. In April 2019, when Fred Kamfer of the SA Hunters Association questioned President Cyril Ramaphosa regarding the state of civilian firearm ownership in South Africa, in typical fashion, the president tiptoed around the issue, but made it clear that he strives to make South Africa a gun-free society. Here follows an excerpt of the conference.
Mr. Kamfer says arms were destroyed at some stage, and the minister said that in the future there will be a time when there won't be a need to have firearms. I can sense from what you're saying, you want to continue having your guns, your firearms for self-protection. I hear you very clearly, and you say the registry is in disarray. Yes, any registry, including this one, as well as the property one, needs to be put in proper shape. I agree with that. But let me tell you my own approach on this. And my approach is born out of an experience that I had. I went to Vietnam a few years ago. Now, Vietnam is a country that has fought wars with mighty nations in the world. The Chinese, they fought. The Vietnamese tried to subjugate them. They warded them off. Then came the French. The French fought the Vietnamese and they also warded them off. Then the Americans. Now, Vietnam, they say, was one of those countries where nearly everyone was armed, even young children. Everybody was armed with either a hand grenade or a AK-47 or whatever gun and so forth. They say they were heavily armed. They had to arrive after the wars that they fought and triumphed, by the way. They had to arrive at a stage of saying, we must now de-arm. We must disarm ourselves, and the only people who are now allowed to bear arms are soldiers, not even police. They said, not even police, but only when it is necessary. But ordinarily, they don't bear arms, only soldiers who might have to fight a war and defend the country and all that. And I went through the whole of Vietnam. I did not see a single police official with a gun. And I said, to me, this looks so ideal. And I said, would we have it in South Africa? Maybe the time has not yet arrived, because we still have a number of problems. Crime is still a major problem, and many people who are killed by guns. And there's poverty, and people need to defend themselves and so forth. So I am going to want a conversation to start in South Africa about the bearing of arms. I'm going to want in time to say, let us have a conversation. Will time come where we actually say, let us all disarm so that we no longer have guns, the guns that are killing so many people. We've become the murder capital of the world. So many people are being killed, and many of them are being killed by guns. The cash in transit heists are done by guns and so forth. I want us to have that type of conversation, but you want the registry to be fixed, and I agree with you. It must be fixed, but at the same time, there needs to come a time when we have that type of conversation.
Did I miss something here? You say you hear us when we say, we want our guns for self-protection, but at the same time you say you want to disarm us. Why fix the firearms registry when you want to get rid of firearms? It's dishonest and ambiguous as always. When you want to understand what Mr. Ramaphosa says, you need to read between the lines. As time goes on, with some more polished words, he will clamp down on the rights to possess a firearm. Dear Mr. President, if I could give some good advice. Before addressing us legal firearm owners, first address the problem of millions of firearms flooding across our open borders, stop illegal firearm trading, stop police from selling thousands of unmarked firearms to gangsters, but more important, get the military wing of your organization, the MK, to give up their massive stockpile of AK-47s. Until then, we the law-abiding citizens of South Africa, will always believe that you and your organization, has ulterior motives. Health institutions will be Africanized, and whites will pay according to their income, to enable them to contribute to their liberated brothers. South African healthcare before 1994 was on par with the rest of the world, and state hospitals were well maintained and equipped. Healthcare was run by competent administrators, and corruption was not the buzzword it is today. But it did not take long for the new administrators and health ministers in the ANC government to systematically destroy the healthcare system with mismanagement and corruption. Most state hospitals in South Africa have turned into death traps for patients, and the healthcare system is falling apart. A study done in 2018 showed that state hospitals suffered from chronic staff shortages, long waiting times, equipment shortages, shortages of consumables and medicine, issues with transport and ambulances, lack of maintenance and infrastructure, and claims due to negligence that fluctuate between 50 to 60 billion rand per year. Because of all the corruption and mismanagement in state healthcare, healthcare in the private sector has grown to a much larger industry. But because it provides care for only 16% of the population, and because of the failures of government to provide proper free health care, the government has been trying to make a move on private healthcare institutions. We are still to see the outcome of it. The prevalent corruption and mismanagement, combined with affirmative action laws, caused a very large number of healthcare professionals to leave these hospitals, most of which were never replaced. Because of all these and several other factors, hospitals are plagued with shortage of staff, medicine, equipment, and even basic needs like toiletries and food for patients. If the intention of Africanizing the healthcare system was to completely destroy it, I would congratulate the ANC on a job well done. And if the intention was to have whites pay for the ANC's so-called liberated brothers, I would say, whites have been doing it ever since the country has existed. But, if the intention of Africanization was to create a better life for blacks, you have failed your own people. This Africanized healthcare system has caused the death and discomfort of many innocent patients, and the ANC should be ashamed of what they have done. Of course, the ANC will see this as a personal attack, and then blame everything on apartheid. Before I started this video I decided to try and do the impossible, and that is to keep blood and violence out of it. So in keeping with my intention, I will cite a few videos about the state of South Africa's hospitals. To have a good idea of what is going on, watch Coping in Chaos, Saturday Night at Khayelitsha Hospital. Hospital Horrors, South Africa. Saving Soweto, Intensive Care. There are many more similar videos, if you keep on searching. Despite the atrocious conditions of hospitals, and the completely inept administration from the top, there are thousands of hospital staff members and doctors, who have not given up out of love for their work, and commitment to their communities. They all deserve medals for their endurance. I will play this out with a video clip of one of these very demoralized, yet persevering hospital staff members.
This is what I can call the hospital of death. If we can just put up our statistics, I'm telling you the number of patients who are dying in this hospital is going. And even ourselves, as staff members, we become affected. I mean, death, nobody has ever got used to death. So everybody is depressed about the rate of death that is taking place in our hospital and caused by Witbank Hospital, by the way, because they are the people who are sending terminally ill patients.
We don't have things to change him. We don't have colostomies. We don't have a gauze. We don't have anything to help him. Even the nappies, we are struggling to get all those things.
I hate the career now. In fact, they make me, the system is pushing me to hate the career because they are pushing us. Like, for instance, if I'm alone in this hospital with a junior doctor, I've got to push the line. I don't consider looking at as a patient as a whole, that the patient is sick and then the patient might have some things to talk to me, social problems and otherwise. We always push the line. We don't attend, we don't really render the good service to our patients. We push the line. My concern is patient. If it was not patients, I would resign and go and open my own practice, or I'll go to overseas. So the reason why I'm still at the hospital, I'm still loyal to a provincial hospital, is that my concern is for these patients who are outside. Impongwe serves a community. We serve quite a huge community. So my concern is for the patient. Otherwise, I would quit. I would take my bag and go.
Some white schools will be allowed, because most settlers will pay their last cent for white education, and this will provide more money for our people. Before I go into the segment, I have to say that I am not here to promote apartheid. It was a very bad time in our history where terrible things happened on both sides. Things that should never be repeated. But one should never forget that there were good people doing very good things during this time as well. If I could, I would take the good things from that time, and replace it with the bad things of today, but without the evil. The apartheid establishment ran an efficient government, and provided world-class education, healthcare and other institutions for the white minority. What is however never favorably mentioned, is that the same government went to great lengths, under immense strain from opposition, to provide education, health care, etc., to the Bantu states. Extremely large investments were made in infrastructure and management. The good work the government did was however overshadowed by the racially segregating policies of apartheid, which caused conflict with different groups within the country. It also gave militant groups a foothold to exploit the situation, which led to several violent revolts where innocent people lost their lives. These militant groups of the time encouraged black people to destroy schools and not attend to any of these educational institutions. People were also encouraged to rise up against the apartheid government by portraying the Bantu education put in place under Dr. H.F. Verwoerd as inferior to that of whites. As a result of these revolts, one whole black generation went without proper education. During the early 1990s when apartheid ended, white schools were open to all races. I noticed during this time how many previously white schools were flooded by black students, while few white schools remain virtually the same up to this day. One could argue that this was part of the plan as set out in the ANC circular, but there is no real proof for that, since many other factors like language and locality had an impact on the racial composition of different schools. What is however very true, and can be directly linked to the circular, is that settlers will pay their last cent to educate their children. White settlers will also seek to provide for their families as well as they possibly can. That is why white schools are financially stronger and have a higher pass rate. It is also very true that there is a pandemic of joblessness under black people, but who is to blame for that? The ANC keeps on blaming whites and apartheid. The time is long overdue that the ANC take responsibility for their own actions, and stop blaming all their failures on everyone and everything else, but themselves. Of course, it will never happen. Therefore I will point out 5 of the greatest issues in our education system, and why South Africa's higher education is ranked 134th out of 138 countries. 1. After 1994, the government encouraged many highly qualified white teachers to leave, but never replaced them with teachers of good quality. 2. Many teachers in public schools are themselves not educated. A study in 2013 showed that 60% of maths teachers for grade 1 to 6, listen carefully, grade 1 to 6, could not pass the same tests drawn up for the children they are supposed to teach. 3. Of course, the well-known devil of corruption, mismanagement and laws of affirmative action, has played a very big role in the fall of education. 4. Up to 14,000 teachers are absent without good reason, and without leave, from schools every single day. And 5. Schools, especially those in black townships, are falling apart due to vandalism, lack of finances, mismanagement and maintenance, while at the same time the opposite is true for white schools. The list of problems is never-ending, and I could go on for a few hours more, like talking about politicians encouraging to burn down universities and schools, but that is a topic for a different video. Statistics do not lie, even though the ANC is trying to manipulate it to hide their failure in education. Because of all the problems with corruption, mismanagement and the lowered standard of learning, only 37% of learners make it from grade 1 to grade 10. From that percentage, only 37% make it from grade 10 through grade 12. In other words, only 13.69% make it from grade 1 to grade 12. But why bother to learn when you can get a free pass into higher education? A recent study has shown that several qualified lawyers cannot reason, read, write, or multiply properly. It is no wonder that several influential black academics now say that the apartheid-era Bantu education system, which was once used as a tool against the apartheid government to incite violence, was much better than the current. Pension funds and insurance companies collected billions over the years, will be to our disposal for education of our comrades, in the years to come. South Africa has over 4 trillion rand in collective pension savings, making it the highest in the world's emerging markets, and 8th largest pension pot in the world, topping even large countries like China. Now that the ANC have plundered the country into bankruptcy, they have set their eyes on pension assets. In the ANC's 2019 election manifesto, they outlined their plans to make use of pension funds by stating, "We will investigate the introduction of prescribed assets on financial institutions' funds, to unlock resources for investments in social and economic development." At the moment, pension fund managers are required by Regulation 28 to spread investments across several asset classes, which are a maximum of 75% in equities, 25% in listed properties, or 30% offshore. You may also invest as much as you want in government bonds. According to the ANC head of economic transformation, who was also part of drafting the resolution, Enoch Godongwana, the ANC are investigating the possibility of using pension funds to boost the economy. He said the government may have to move for an amendment to broaden Regulation 28, if the circumstances after investigation necessitated that. Such an amendment will not need to go through Parliament, and can be changed in an instant by the signature of a minister. Overnight, these funds could be thrown at failing government institutions like Eskom, SABC and others, which will open up the doors for even more corruption and state capture. Be sure that the funds will disappear into the pockets of corrupt officials. Currently the government and all its state-owned enterprises are in a debt crisis. If there is no significant growth in the economy after the May 2019 elections, the credit ratings agency, Moody's, will be forced to downgrade South Africa even more. This will force stable investors out of the country, which in turn will open up the door to the next easy option. the pension funds of the country. But I doubt the ANC will need a downgrading by Moody's to take control of the pension funds. After all, that was the promise made to the comrades in Circular 2136. As one can also clearly see, the promises in the rest of the circular has been kept, and are just about completed. The frog should be boiled by now, and ready to be served. The Boer Afrikaners are a very resolute nation, which has gone through many hardships. Their forefathers came to South Africa as strong Protestant Christians, who fled religious persecution in Europe. All throughout their history they had to defend themselves, and never took up arms to attack any other nation. Now, once again, they are on their own, with several forces from all over the world, aligned against them. The ANC has clearly shown in everything they do, that they absolutely want to destroy the Boer Afrikaner nation, and they have been building on this plan slowly, and meticulously. Over the past 25 years, pressure on whites, and the hateful rhetoric has increased so much, that Dr. Gregory Standen from Genocide Watch has placed the country in the final stages just before all-out genocide. The native language of the Boer Afrikaner is systematically being removed from the education system. Hateful rhetoric is spewed from public platforms, and there are even calls to arms against whites by several politicians. White farmers are being attacked and murdered almost every day. We are slowly being disarmed. Whites are being pushed out of jobs and denied free access to employment. Even the judicial system and the media seem to be against whites and favor blacks who are politically connected. Despite all this, and so many other problems facing whites, the ANC have been dead silent, and by this have shown they are complicit. How many more warning signs do there need to be, before the world wakes up to what is going on in South Africa? At this moment our only hope may be to pray to God, to once again save us from annihilation, as he did before.
Chairperson, I come to cry. And I want to ask you, why is it so difficult to publicly condemn farm murders in South Africa? In South Africa we have black farmers, we have colored farmers, we have Indian farmers, we have white farmers. The food you had this morning when you had breakfast, you must thank the farmers. Everybody who's going to have lunch just now, thank the farmers. Chairperson, ek wil vir die agbare president sê, verlede jaar ongeveer hierdie tyd, was daar aanvalle gewees op moskees, een in KwaZulu-Natal en een in Mamasbury. U tree onmiddellik op. U benoem onmiddellike presidensiële komitee van die minister van polisie, van verdediging en van justisie. Ek wil vandag vir u sê, 'n plaasmoord is nie 'n moord op 'n individu nie. It's not only a crime against an individual, it's a crime against the community. It is the women and children who pay the price of a farm murder, where they are tortured, where they throw boiling water down their throats, where they take hot irons burning the women, where they force a 12-year girl to see how her mother is raped. That's torture. But still, you do refuse to publicly condemn farm murders. I appeal to you. It's simple. And I will say to you, Honorable President, I will invite you to a funeral of a farm murder, and you invite me to any other funeral you wish to. Now there's a song that says, it's actually the green, green grass of home. It's about this prisoner who sang and he thought in his song, I want to touch the green, green grass of home. And then he says, and when I wake and I look around me, I was surrounded by 4 great walls. And yes, I then realized that I was only dreaming. Because he's a prisoner. Honorable President, You are a prisoner of the African National Congress. Break away from that. Then you can save South Africa. Then you can save the economy. I thank you.
Please realize that Ramaphosa has not condemned farm murders for a reason. It will fly in the face of the ANC's 25-year plan with the whites. When Jacob Zuma was in power, he had Julius Malema as his sidekick, running the ANC Youth League. Malema was supposed to become the next ANC and then state president. Ramaphosa has been keeping with the plan, which they call the struggle, but now that the next step of the revolution has come, he is trying to slow things down, because the frog is about to jump out of the pot. However, Ramaphosa must keep with what the ANC and SACP tell him to do, but the ANC camp is split, and seemingly do not see eye to eye. Therefore the Zuma camp will try to depose Ramaphosa, and put someone else in, who is way more radical. If this happens, the Zuma camp will have revolutionary leaders like Malema behind them with a very large group of radicalized followers. Zuma also has the ANC Youth League, and MK at his feet, and these people are believed to be heavily armed. We have survived the May 2019 elections, but the country is in trouble. Anything can happen from here on. Things may seem to have quietened down, and the fires before the election seems to have dissipated, but the country is a powder keg waiting to explode. I know, because I am living it, but do not take my word for it. Listen to what our political leaders have in store for our future. Thank you for listening, and remember, to seek God's face, always.
We're saying, in fact, people must actually go into the white spaces. Like we call very openly for people to invade the suburbs, the beaches, these places which are remain secluded. We also, as a movement that take land seriously, we are not going to ask for permission from land thieves and government. We are going to organize land occupation of white-owned land, not squatter camps land and so on. Because only if we break white power, which rests on the ownership of land, can we deal with the race question.
One bullet, one settler. One settler, one bullet. One bullet, one settler. One settler, one bullet. One bullet.
Those who are ready to become soldiers in this revolution, join BLF, make it your organization. We are organizing 50,000 REG soldiers. You must please sign up. We are organizing 50,000 REG soldiers. You must please sign up. Nothing made bad by the conditions that make white people rich. We are poor because they are rich. And unfortunately for us, our politicians are defending white people. I am giving you today a shield and a sword so that we can fight and defeat the enemy that defeated our people since 1652. And always remember where they come from, so they leave our country. Me and you can enjoy the wealth that God has given us. Amen, amen there. Amen. Each one of us will kill 5 white people, will kill the children, will kill the women, will kill anything that we find on our way. We kill the children, we kill the women, we kill their dogs, we kill their cats, we kill anything that comes before us.
Julius Malema is a real danger to this country. Julius Malema is the biggest threat this country has ever faced. Julius Malema will take this country down with him. Julius Malema called white people land thieves. Nelson Mandela died knowing that he's leaving behind a rainbow nation. So why did we agree to that today if we should call one part of the rainbow thieves? By a bigger thief. I was a thief. I was a conman. I know a thief and a conman when I see one.
When you see so fast, Kichima, Sibram Kondo, Alaye, shoot to kill.
Massa, shoot to kill, kill 'em, kiss the poor, the farmer, kiss the poor, the farmer, brr, pa, pa, brr, pa, pa, attention.
The people of South Africa must welcome the fact that he is the incoming president of South Africa. Comrade President. Choo choo, choo choo, choo choo, choo choo, choo choo. Amanda.
Stop being crybabies who are in a revolution here. Some who are going to win, some who are going to lose. We are moving forward. They only back at a moving car. This car of the revolution is unstoppable. People talk about VBS. This, hey, VBS. You, hey, hey, man. What's your problem? VBS or no VBS, this car of the revolution is moving forward. It is unstoppable. It is unstoppable. Revolution is won through all types of means. If you don't know what a revolution is, read the EFF. You come here because you become sheepish. You are so scared. You are ashamed. The problem is you have never read an EFF document. Read the EFF founding manifesto. It says, we will win this revolution using any means necessary. So let me tell you something here. If you are not prepared to take guns at some point, you are in a wrong hole. Because there might be a day where the enemy makes condition necessarily for arms to be taken. And when that time comes, we will not hesitate. We will take the enemy toe to toe. We will defeat the enemy. We will never retreat. By the time we take guns, you must not say to us, hey, we said to you, any means necessary to win the revolution. And we who are commanding this revolution will be engaged in activities that are going to make it possible. Some of those activities may not be exposed to the membership and the ground forces. By mistake, if you come to know about them, do not doubt the wisdom of the leadership. Trust that our leaders know what they are doing. You gave us an opportunity to lead this thing. We are leading it. And we are building it ground up. Slowly. We want to tell a story at some point when we are old, all of us in our farms, which would have taken through expropriation of land without compensation.
Shoot to kill, Yamasa. Kiss the poor, the farmer. Kiss the poor, the farmer.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am very proud being a South African today. For everybody that has made the effort to come and lift their voices about the farm murder situation in our country. I live in Bronkhorstspruit, and in 2008, the 20th of November, the night, we were attacked. I was shot through the back, and my wife, unfortunately, was killed. I want to say to each South African today that if you go and sit and have a meal, please be thankful to the farmers, because that's where it's coming from. But I want to say to Malema today, who is the big instigator of farm murders, I want to challenge him today. I will give him a rifle, I will load it, and I will stand still so that he can finish what they began. But I want to see if he's a man, because he can shout out to the youngsters and tell them to go murder the farmers on their farms. But I want to give him a weapon so that he can come and shoot me where everybody can see that, so that he can show whether he's a man or whether he's a mouse. I don't even call him Mr. Malema, because Mr. still refers to a man. So I want to challenge him today, and I'm very, very serious about that. I don't mind dying. He can come and finish what they didn't finish, and let's see whether he has guts to do what he teaches the youngsters to do.